Have you ever seen someone get stoned to death? Back when I was doing research for a paper on critical punishment, I found a video of Iranians being stoned to death for various crimes such as adultery, disobeying their father, and even just immodesty. As these crimes suggest, the criminals were mostly women, of course. While some women were free to move about and try to defend themselves with their hands, others were either tied to a post or buried up to their chest in the ground, while men, always men, and many with smiles on their faces, threw baseball-sized stones as hard as they could, causing grievous wounds to these criminals. Many of the men seemed to revel in the sound of the horrifying screams of the women. It was the worst video I've ever seen in my life. It turned my stomach and I nearly threw up. And yet, this is the exact punishment that the Bible mandates for offenses ranging from serious crimes like murder to very subjective crimes such as blasphemy and idolatry. It even mandates death for the extremely odd and silly crime of, quote, approaching near to Mount Sinai while the presence of God was there. If you believe in Christianity or any of the Abrahamic faiths, I implore you to ask yourself why any good being with any power at all, much less a God, would mandate this type of treatment for somebody who had, for example, been disrespectful to their parents. If you have an answer to this or questions about this, or if you just want to chat about your beliefs, call us because the show starts now. Welcome, everybody. Hi, today is February 15th, 2026. I'm your host, the Cross Examiner, and with me today, right now, is Jim Barrows. How you doing, Jim?
Hey, not too bad. How about yourself?
Good. Long time no see, man.
Yeah, it has been a little bit.
Yeah. I have seen you on various shows, I think mostly Atheist Experience. Have you been doing any other shows that we should watch?
Yeah, I've been doing, oh shoot, now I'm having, of course, a senior moment.
Put him on the point. I shouldn't have done that.
Skeptic Haven, I have been on their Sunday show a couple of times, and I have also been on with Matt a couple of times.
Oh, great.
Over there. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, this is the Atheist Experience. It's a product of the Atheist Community of Austin. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Normally I'd chat for a bit and ask people to call, but we have somebody, at least one, it looks like several callers already queued up, and I'm pretty sure they all want to talk to you. So without further ado, why don't we pick up Chris from Ohio? The note here says you want to discuss the Anglican theology tradition. Let me see, get you on the line. Chris, is that what you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. Hi, gentlemen. Nice to meet you.
Hello. So what do you want to frame the conversation for us?
Show about a decade ago when I was a non-believer, but I don't think either of you were a host at that time. But I have since become an Anglican, and I went looking back on your recent back catalog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was seeing, yeah, I'm still here. I'm sorry. I noticed that in the past and in the recent past with an AI, summary of the callers, there was a lot of like Baptist and Pentecostal interpretations of the Bible. There are more than that. Those guys are just the ones most comfortable, like,
oh yeah, we know.
Calling in, I think, is kind of what it is.
There's over 1,000 different denominations, all of whom disagree on vital points of theology and disagree on what the Bible means and interpreting the Bible, which is fine if you take the Bible simply as a piece of literature. There's a lot of different ways to interpret Moby Dick and the Dresden Files and almost any piece of literature. It just seems really, really weird that you'd have 1,000 different interpretations of a book that is supposed to be the book written by the God. Just seems weird. But yeah. We're well aware that they're all different. We just don't know. Nobody has yet to be able to provide a objective method for determining what the book actually says. It seems to me, and maybe you can you may disagree on this, that the only way to determine what the Bible actually says is to stack up Bible verses and see whoever has the most Bible verses. I don't know any other way to do it.
I don't know if I would agree with that perspective or not.
Well, why don't you educate us a little bit? Like, I know
Mhm.
the basics about the Anglican theology. It's often described as the three-legged stool, right? Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Scripture, tradition, and it claims that the
And
third
reason.
leg is reason. So why don't you explain to me what that means to you, and then we can react to what you believe and why you believe it.
Yeah. So I've seen it explained a few different ways. One way that I've seen it explained that works is some people try to explain it as scripture is prime and then tradition comes from it and reason is your litmus test.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how I've been taught. It's kind of that they're all mingled together. The scripture gives traditions. And when you follow those traditions, you can litmus test with reason. So it's not that that's completely wrong, but it's that reason also forms the traditions. And
Well, then I have a question for you. If you've got these different ways of teaching it just within this tradition, I guess my first question is, I assume that you would agree, let me know whether or not you agree, that the question,
of course,
that the main question that many people believe is the main question that this religion or tradition seeks to answer is what happens after we die. That's like the most important question, because many people posit an answer that says, well, if you do the right things, you can choose to live forever and be happy, etc. Would you agree that that's like a really important question that most people are looking to answer with their religion?
could you phrase that one more time? I
Sure.
think I caught
What am I?
something I wasn't going to agree with, but I want to make sure I heard it.
Okay. What the core question is, it seems to me that the most important question of possibly of all time, I'm going to put it way out there, is does anything happen after we die, or is this all there is, right? And religions tend to want to say, no, 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 something happens after you die, and here's what you have to do to get to the reward, right? To get to heaven or to be with God, however you phrase it. Would you agree that that is, if not the most important question, a very, 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 very important question?
It's an important question. I don't know that it's the most important question. And I think that part of what caught me was saying if you do something.
Well, let's ignore that part.
Right?
I'm just focusing on the question. You do the right thing, whether
Yeah,
believing something or accepting something is doing something we can talk about. But I get your objection there. But the reason I asked that question is so I can ask this question. If it is at least a very, very important question, if not the most important question, one that you would think would be really important to God because he seems to dwell upon it a lot, or at least those who are teaching what they think God wants seem to dwell on it. Wouldn't you expect, going back to Jim's point, that it would be fairly clear answer? Whereas what we see, we don't see like an instruction manual. We don't see anything that any reasonable person using the three legs of Anglican, scripture, what's written down, tradition, what we've always done, and reason, we've reasoned this out. That even within the school, you just admitted you're being taught differently. The Abrahamic religions disagree with each other, and they disagree with religions that are without the Abraham religion. So
yeah.
We've never seen, even within Christianity, any agreement as to, is it deeds? Is it faith? Is it accepting Jesus? Doesn't that
I'm not sure that
smell like something that is like,
sure
that's not how an omnipotent
Christian
God would...
tradition
Hold on a second.
would say
I'm asking you a question. I'm going to mute you. Doesn't that smell like something that would be a result of human endeavors? That isn't it true that an all-powerful God who really wanted you to be saved would be very, very clear on how to go about it? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it's not unclear to me. When I look at the different traditions of Christianity, because I saw 7 traditions of them in a 7-week period last year, they really did come to me as different accents in the same language.
Why do most of the people on the planet Earth disagree with you?
I beg your pardon?
You said it's clear to me. My response is, then why do most people on this planet disagree with you? Are you right? Are you saying it's clear to me, therefore I am right? I can't be wrong? Or is it could possibly other people be just as confident in their faith that contradicts yours?
Are you asking in regards to just Christianity or of all faiths?
All people, all faiths.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how I should answer that question. Or not even how I should. I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Okay.
I'm not trying to avoid it. I just don't know how to answer it.
That's a great answer. I love that answer. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Well, I was going to say, just staying within the Christian faith, are you a works alone, faith alone, some mix of the two, or are you it doesn't matter because God's already chosen? Because all three of those are some version, or all three of those consider the other two heretical, right? So when you say they all have the different notes of the same song or whatever you wanted to phrase that, that ain't the same notes of this, different song or whatever you wanted to phrase that. That is a completely different thing. So how do you, which of those three are you?
I myself would be considered a hyper-Calvinist with absolute predestination, with regards to absolute predestination.
Right. And so would you like me to name off the religions that think you're heretical?
Troublesome by saying that I think I am a Christian who's absolutely predestined to hell, for all that means. That might be the first. Right.
That doesn't really answer the question now, is how do you respond to all the different Christian religions who think you are a heretic for your belief? Because that's not, I forget how you phrased it, right? That's not
the Orthodox. Definitely the Orthodox would agree, as would the Roman Catholics.
That's not Jim's question, though. He's asking, even within Christianity, a bunch of people disagree with you. And Jim's question was, how do you respond to those people?
I hope this answers the question, but I kind of see it that if the different denominations weren't supposed to be here, God wouldn't have let them be here.
Isn't that a form of God works in mysterious ways, though? Hold on. I got a question, Chris. Hold on. Isn't that answer just a form of God works in mysterious ways? It's a form of I don't know, right? And that's an honest answer. But saying I don't know, but then adding on this assumption that, well, if God didn't want it to be, then it wouldn't be, that just presupposes that God exists. There's multiple possible explanations.
I see what you mean.
One is that God exists and he wants it this way. One is that God wants it this way. God exists, but he doesn't want this way, but he's too incompetent to clearly give instruction to people. And the third is God doesn't exist, and we're all just sort of taking what our parents taught us and disagreeing with each other about it. So how do you differentiate between those three options?
I'm thinking on the spot of how to answer the question.
That's fair.
So
yeah, you want me to give you an easier?
Maybe I will recite a joke that illustrates the point, if you'll indulge me.
It's your show. I'm glad to let you.
All right, I'm gonna tell a joke. It takes about a minute to tell, maybe 2 minutes, but it's, I think, the best joke ever written. It's by Emo Phillips. The joke goes as follows: once I saw this guy on a bridge about to jump. I said, "Don't do it." He said, "Nobody loves me." I said, "God loves you. Do you believe in God?" And he said, "Yes." I said, are you a Christian or a Jew? And he said, Christian. And I said, me too. Are you Protestant or Catholic? He said, Protestant. I said, me too. What franchise? He said, Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Baptist or Southern Baptist? He said, Northern Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist or Northern Liberal Baptist? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region or Northern Conservative Baptist Eastern region? And he said, Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region. And I said, me too. Northern Conservative Great Lakes Region Council of 1879 or Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1912? And he said, Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1912. And I said, die, heretic, and I pushed him over. That's what it sounds like to me.
This joke.
That's what it sounds like to me when I hear all of these different people come to me telling me, I figured it out. I have the truth and everybody else is wrong. So how do I differentiate between the Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1912 and that of 1879?
So the thing with many Anglicans is that we subscribe to branch theory, and we consider more churches than many to be valid churches. So I don't know, because we consider the East Orthodox, the Roman Catholics, the Lutherans, and Methodists, and many of the Reformed, and even the Baptists, we consider them validly Christian.
So I appreciate that answer,
so I don't
but
know if I'm equipped to handle that one. Like,
okay.
You said, how do we know between? If I give the hypothetical between like Jehovah's Witnesses or any of the others, I might be able to answer on that front if that's in the same vein for you.
No, yeah, generally, Jim, I think you had something to ask there.
Yeah, so I just like to simplify it. Is God the author? Is God responsible for the confusion?
Good question.
I would say no. He's not. But you just said that God. But you said earlier that if there's 1,000 different denominations, they exist because God wants them to exist.
Sure.
So how do you reconcile your answer to my question, is God the author of confusion, with no, and yet God apparently has created confusion by having 1,000 different denominations, as the cross-examiner just beautifully illustrated with his joke? How do you reconcile that? Because it is confusing, at least to humans. It may not be to God, but who cares? We got to deal with this shit. So how do you reconcile those two? Because your two answers are completely logically contradictory.
The way that I kind of see it is many of the denominations are like a different accent of the same language.
That can't be true. That literally cannot be true if they consider if every religion considers every other Christian religion heretical. And they do.
If they make contradictory claims, if we have different, hold on, Chris. If they make contradictory claims, A is true on one hand and A is not true on the other, they can't both be different accents, right? You can do that on the small details, and you can also do it on the big details, like how do you get salvation? Is there life after death? Is it immoral to, for a man to kiss a man? Like, at any point, there's going to be a disagreement. And if somebody's claiming to have the truth in one, then they are saying by necessity that the others that disagree with those points are false, that they've got it wrong. So it's not a different accent where we can listen to the accents and all understand each word. There's, one is saying not and one is saying is. So how do you reconcile those?
I would reconcile by saying the required doctrines are kind of that core foundation level.
Could you define, before you go on, could you just define doctrine for me? Hold on. Just I want you to keep going. I just need you to define doctrine. What do you mean by doctrine?
Yeah. Give me just a second. I know the word. I'm not very great at like providing the definition if it's not in front of me.
Okay, I would hope and I would encourage anybody calling in to talk about these things to use words that you know the definition of. I mean, that's just a a pro tip from an attorney who argues in front of judges sometimes, or did in the past.
I get what you're saying. It's one of those things like I couldn't define the word "is" to you, even though I can use it.
Okay, well, let me propose a definition, because what I think you said was circular.
Go for it.
Okay, a doctrine is a set of beliefs taught by a church. In this case, it could be a political party or whatever, but it's just a set of beliefs. Is that a fair definition?
I would agree.
The Monroe Doctrine, right? We should expand.
Yeah.
The Christian doctrine, Jesus is God or Jesus is the way to be saved. It's just a set of beliefs. Yes. Now, beliefs mean that you believe, that word means you believe them to be true. So I think when you say, when I ask, how can we resolve two religions that disagree with each other on some core issues, and you say something about doctrines, you're just referencing their beliefs all over again. My question is about methodology, not about your belief or anybody else's belief. I'm asking, what's the measuring stick? We've got two claims here. Jesus rose from the dead and was performed miracles, and in believing in him or accepting him is a way to some sort of reward. And there's a bunch of people who say hogwash, that's not true. How do we determine which of those is true? That's the core question of all of this, isn't it?
Okay. Sorry, I didn't understand the question you were trying to get to. It's more clear.
Okay.
And I kind of went through that when I was visiting the different denominations, but I wouldn't be able to vocalize how I was able to say this was or was not resonating properly. I don't know how to express that sensation.
And again, we come back to when you say accents of the different things, it's not, right? When you call somebody else a heretic, that's not an accent. Right? And so if you're faith only, works only, or everything's predestined, there are churches who disagree with you fundamentally on those three things.
And,
right?
And getting back to what Chris said, good point, Jim, but to respond to you, Chris, I think that was a genuine answer. I appreciate your answer. You said, if I understood your answer, I want to make sure I understood it. I think you said, you found something that, quote, resonated with you. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's the word I used. It's the best word I could come up with in the moment.
Sure.
I haven't.
It for want of a better word, it rang true for you.
Correct.
Okay. Do you think that's the best way to answer very important questions like how I should behave, what we should do, what we shouldn't do? Is there life after death? Just based on your feelings?
Absolutely not. It should not be the only answer.
Okay. What other methodologies would we use, right? Are there any that you use on everyday things? Like if I came up to you and said, hey, buddy, I got an investment for you. If you give me $1 million, then in 3 weeks, I can get you 10 million. I got this new Bitcoin thing that's going on. You'd have a lot of questions. You'd want some evidence. You'd want some documents. You want to come see a business plan.
Would be that's not true.
You're not the proper position, quite frankly, to get into it is not that it's not true. It's that you are not going to accept it as true until you're presented with sufficient evidence, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not that I'm lying. It's just you're not going to believe me until you've seen sufficient evidence. So what type of evidence would you want in that case? You'd want documents. You'd want, show me it happened multiple times. Show me your office space. And even then, that might not be enough because we've seen a lot of scam artists that are pretty good. Bernie Madoff, right? Made billions on running this scam with a lot of people. So you'd need a lot of evidence before you would accept that you could give me a bunch of money and I could return it tenfold. shouldn't you demand even more evidence on matters of life and death than eternal salvation?
Yeah, I guess I ended up finding that with
Okay.
with my multiple weeks. I just don't know how to express like what the feeling is the best English word I can come up with. It's not like I had an emotion and said, "Cool, I'm Christian now." It was a longer process than that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe there's another way we could ask the question: why should anybody else believe what you believe?
Well, the way that I suspect that I would just say you should, come to church and see what happens. If it does, admittedly, the evidence I had was all kind of non-physical and intangible. So I certainly wouldn't go, well, you got to believe because I feel better. Like I wouldn't say that. That doesn't work. And the Orthodox and the Anglicans kind of have a come and see mentality. So that's part of why I was calling in. I'm like, I bet they don't get a lot of Anglican callers because Anglicans and Orthodox both do the come and see.
Yeah.
But they're wrong. I mean, they're fundamentally wrong that there's a common theme. There can't be when there's differences, fundamental differences in doctrine, right?
Yes.
So
yes, there are.
That's just wrong.
Admittedly complicated.
There is no common theme.
One has to ask, what is the difference between what you did and what a member of the Church of Scientology did to become a member? What is the difference between what you did and any belief system that you would consider a cult? And I'm not comparing yours to a cult. Religions are not cults. Okay. They are very different, but I think it's illustrative to study how people get involved in cults and compare to what you're saying, because they do the same thing. They go somewhere, they have a feeling, there's not a lot of evidence, but they liked the experience, so they go along with it, and they, even through their participation, give their tacit endorsement of it, even if they don't go out proselytizing, right?
Sure.
Isn't there a risk there? I'm not, again, not saying that Christianity is a cult. I'm just saying that's where that leads. So the method itself of just, I go around, I talk to some people, this sounds good, and so I'm going to accept all of their claims, and maybe I'm assuming that premise. That seems risky to me. It seems just as risky as somebody coming up to me and saying, "Hey, give me your money, I'll give it back to you in 3 weeks with tenfold." Like,
sure.
We have real world examples of cult after cult after cult doing that to people. And I would also suppose, I don't know about Jim, that generally established religions around the world have just as little evidence as they do, and yet they make trillions of dollars selling the same type of stories. So aren't you worried that you're getting scammed?
I mean, a decade ago, I would have said I am being scammed, admittedly. Because a decade ago, I was an atheist.
Okay.
But now it does. I don't think I am. I guess the cult member that you're talking about would say, no, I haven't been scammed either. But
how would the cult member prove that, and how would you prove that? Not that you have to prove you're not being scammed. That's hard to prove. But let me take another tack. Maybe Jim can chime in on this, because I'm not as good on the theological part. But there's a difference between I show up for cake and pie and I feel good talking to the people around me. There's a difference between that and therefore I accept the claim that Jesus walked on water, rose from the dead, went to heaven, and sits at the right hand of God, right? There's a difference between I feel good and so I like participating in the community versus I accept the claims of this organization. I'm operating under the assumptions that you accept the claims of the organization based on your experiences. Is that accurate?
That would be accurate, yes.
Okay. So then I would turn it over to Jim, because he understands those claims a little bit more. Like, isn't there a disconnect there between accepting the claims because I just went somewhere and had some sort of experience? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're social animals, and every social animal requires itself to be around others of its kind, right? I mean, that's kind of how you define a social animal. And that is what we are. Churches are really, really good at reinforcing the social aspect through threats and intimidation, love bombing, all this cultic type stuff that happens. Religions are really, really good at doing. Atheist groups aren't nearly as good at doing it, partially because we recognize the danger in doing that, and also partially because it just feels icky to resort to those tactics. But just because you feel something, there's a really interesting study that was done of 207,000 U.S. immigration court decisions, and they cross-reference with the temperature outside the courtroom. And courts are someplace where rationality is supposed to be king. The only place you'd expect more rationality is in science, right? I would recommend, science top number one in rationality, courts number two, right? There's a problem with that, though. Right. So for every 10-degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature, there was a reduced favorable decision rate of about 6.5%. We aren't rational. We aren't rational. We try to be, but we're not. And feelings always affect us. So just because you feel something doesn't mean it's true. Because you can feel multiple things at the same time. You can feel really, really happy that someone you love got a great job, and really, really sad that they're moving away. So how does that affect the truth of anything? It doesn't. Feelings should be the last thing that we use, even though it directly affects every decision we make, which is the other thing that the science shows us. But if you're trying to be rational and think about things rationally, then feelings shouldn't have anything to do with it, especially when you have a group that wants you to act irrationally at some point, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Every Christian is at least, no matter what kind of Christian they are, is at least one Bible verse away from thinking slavery is okay. And we have pointed this out on this show multiple times, and people went, well, I guess I have to accept slavery because the Bible clearly does. And you're literally one Bible verse away from accepting something as true and moral that I'm willing to bet you don't accept true and moral right now. All because you started believing because the Bible felt good to you.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I must admit, currently the Bible feels quite frustrating because I'm in Leviticus, but
gotcha.
That's besides the point.
Gotcha.
Well,
what do you think about what? Go ahead.
If anything, Leviticus should convince you that it is the Bible is completely irrational by today's standards.
Yeah, and so what are your thoughts there,
I mean,
Chris?
I would agree.
We don't want to imply. Hold on a second. I just want to frame this a little bit.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. There's some delay sometimes on these internet calls. So what are your thoughts on that? I know you said earlier it's not just because you experienced something, but that was a major part of it. Mm-hmm. And when we asked you for sort of the evidence part, there was nothing there. So that's why we're focusing on this experiential part. What is your response to Jim's sort of whole take on that? Well, that seems to devalue using experiential experiences as a decision maker.
It was more of a case of I'm not sure how to express the experience. Methodists tend to be better at that than Anglicans at expressing experiences.
Well, why don't you go away and think about that and call back next time? I really appreciate your call. We got a lot of callers on the line.
Thank you so much for your guys' time. I really appreciated getting to chat with you. And I appreciated you guys' time with me. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I would really encourage, I'd love to hear more, because I think putting into words why you accept somebody else's claims is important. Because if you can't, there might be a problem there, right? If you can't put it into words, there's a problem. And the more important the question at risk, I think the more skeptical, if you want to use that word, although it's not the proper use, like we're all skeptical, but the more suspicious you should be of the claim. So if you could call back next time and let us know what that experience was, and more importantly, why or why it should convince anybody else to believe that stuff, and what it means for you. Like, we didn't even go there, but we do have to get on the other one. So thank you very much. I do appreciate your time. Jim, I've run into that sort of situation a lot. Have you had that sort of caller before?
Yeah. And that's why I kind of went to feelings are not a valid way. And also that feelings infect everything we do.
Yeah.
Obviously from the court cases, the immigration court cases, going against the person at a slightly increased rate for every 10 degrees of heat. And that also makes sense, right? It fits with our experience. People are irritable when it gets hot outside, and less irritable when it gets cold. And, so these types of, and that's a problem if you're going with feelings only. It's why we should try to be as rational as possible. It just doesn't make any sense, right? You have to recognize that we're not perfectly rational all the time. And it takes a lot of work to be rational. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking Fast and Slow, that book, he points out there are two models of thinking. One is the fast model, and the other one is the slow model. Fast model is just pattern recognition. 1 + 1 = 2. Everyone did not do any math. We pattern recognize 1 + 1, and our brains snapped to 2. But if I ask, what is the square root of 1,333,000,000, now we're going to have to do the math. Mm-hmm. And so it takes a lot more effort to think rationally and to think it through. And, just because it feels good, what you've read, I mean, he's reading Leviticus. I can't wait for him to get to chapter 25, 44 through 46, where it says you can have slaves.
Yep.
You can even bequeath them to your sons after you to receive as a possession. You can use them as permanent slaves.
Yeah, and something to point out to Chris, if he's still listening, when you get to that part, examine what your brain does when you read that stuff. Or like in my cold open when I was talking about stoning, like the realities of what it was like to be stoned and to stone somebody. Roll that over in your brain and say, this is a flat out assertion of what the law should be from a God in this book that we all hold to be true if we are Christians. How do I reconcile that with what I think God is? And if you find yourself making excuses, well, he had to allow slavery back then because apparently God needs to be a political gradualist in that area and not in you shall not eat shellfish, right? He had to stone people because that was the best tech available. There's all sorts of excuses you can make for this God character. But if you find yourself wanting to make excuses, that's what we call you negotiating with the text. You're not reading the text, which is, for the most part, these laws are plain black and white. You are negotiating it with it. And I would put it to you that all of the different faith traditions that you identified are also negotiating with the text. They are not reading the black and white letters and saying, okay, that's the Bible, right? That's the word of God. They interpret, they twist, they say that this no longer counts, and they disagree on when to do that. So I think that's where you end up with 10,000 different denominations of Christianity.
Yeah.
We have go ahead.
I was saying, and they all, fundamentally disagree. And I just touched on a few of the disagreements.
Yeah.
We didn't touch on Catholics and for the forgiveness of sins. That's another big one.
Yep.
This whole
and the fact that it changes
work
over time. Let's talk about indulgences.
yeah.
So, all right, we've got another caller here. We're going to talk to Gohan. who wants to make a pro-life argument. So I'm going to, before we bring Gohan on, I will say this show is entitled The Atheist Experience because we're interested in what people believe from a religious perspective and why. If you have other reasons that you think people should be pro-life, I guess we can talk about that for a little bit, but it won't be as interesting. So I'm just putting that caveat out there. So Gohan, I'm putting you on. Can you hear us? And what is it that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. How are you guys?
Okay. Doing great. How are you?
So I was going to talk about abortion and try to give a argument. I've given a couple of times, but I would like to hear a better reason why I'm wrong. And the argument kind of goes like this. I think it's a good argument.
Because every argument for every so-called pro-life argument ends up with women are incubators.
Well, let's hear what he has to say. But yeah, that may be true. Go ahead, Gohan.
So I think this is an argument that goes that even if you are a secular humanist, you would agree with. But
okay, so before you get going, I'm just going to ask that you give us premise and then pause so we can examine it. Because when I get into these conversations, it's very easy for somebody to say, well, because of A, B, and C, therefore D. And we have to go back to A and say, well, wait a second, I disagree with A. So if you could structure your discussion as a set of like, this is true, right? We agree on this, right? And therefore, you know, that I would really appreciate. So go ahead.
Okay. I guess there are three premises and then one conclusion. But the first premise is that it's wrong to kill a human organism unless there's high risk of severe harm.
I think we have to define some terms there before we go into the second premise. We need to define some terms.
Okay.
1 is kill, 2 is human, 3 is organism. Although human, I think maybe human organism is what we need to define. So let's just start with those. Okay. So first, what do you define as a human organism?
Whatever biology defines as a human organism, it's got to be.
Can you please tell me what that is?
It's either an organism that's either unicellular or multicellular that has the human genome and develops into, if allowed to develop, would develop into an adult human.
So I'm not a human organism under that definition.
Why?
Because I will not develop into an adult. I am an adult.
No, that's fair. Either has or will develop. Continue to develop towards an adult human.
I think you're just trying to say that anybody who has the DNA to make a human is a human organism. Is that what you're trying to say?
Not anybody. Just any cell that is a organism that has human DNA.
Yeah, anything that has human DNA.
Okay, so I think we're going to disagree then.
No. Sorry.
Okay.
Not anything, because like human tissue would not be a human organism. Human organism is separated from like tissue from like
your that we could take human skin and revert it back to I forget what the cell is called, and then have it develop into other things, right?
I don't think you can take a skin and have it go back into a zygote and then come back to an adult human.
Not yet, but however, we can assemble test tube babies by combining eggs and DNA, etc.
Yeah.
So, but let's jump to what the point of that is. I think the point of that is to say you want to consider the combination of an egg and a sperm. As soon as that happens, that as at that moment you are calling it a human organism. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. So restate your first claim again so we can understand it again using that definition. The first premise, I'm sorry.
I left 2 words out of it, so I'm going to include them here. But you should not be able to directly and purposefully kill a human organism without high risk, that does not present high risk of severe harm.
Okay, I disagree with that premise.
And that goes into the second premise. The second premise was that.
Well, let's talk about the first premise. I disagree with it. Where do we go from there?
Why do you disagree with it?
I think that you should be able to kill a human organism. And I think it happens all the time, both naturally and due to human action. Because under your definition of a human organism, one sperm, one egg come together. As soon as that happens, my understanding of biology is you would call that a human organism. That's going to die naturally. It could die accidentally. It could die on purpose, either at that moment or at any moment along the way. And I don't think there's anything immoral about that until some other aspects or characteristics attain to that being, if you want to call it a being. That's, I think, where we disagree. So I don't want to speak for Jim.
Purposefully, sorry to butt in, but you're saying if you directly and purposefully kill a human organism, that is okay?
Depends on the
because of your definition, right?
What I thought we.
I'm not saying any human organism, but because you're saying it's an absolute premise, I have to disagree with the premise. I believe there are times when it is okay to kill a human organism. For example, self-defense, right? That's a classic example. But also, it's okay if I knew I had a sperm and an egg on my fingertip and I irradiated it or something, and I could have done something else to save it or put it somewhere. I believe there's no moral judgment or value attaches to that event. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Well, I think I know where he's going with this, and
and that's why I wanted to stick with premise one, because this is how you smuggle this concept in.
Well, I think the fundamental problem is that I think, Gohan, do you think that abortion automatically kills the fetus?
I mean, I didn't bring up abortion. We're still on the premise of human organism.
I didn't ask that question. I'm asking if you think that abortion kills a fetus. Because if you do, you are fundamentally wrong in what an abortion is. An abortion is a termination of pregnancy. But you're also wrong because about a quarter of all pregnancies end up with the death of the fetus. So your pro-life stance based on God doesn't work. But I'm willing to grant you P1 just for the sake of argument. I'm just letting you know that you've got a rough road to hoe to even get close to your premise.
Yeah.
To your conclusion.
Jim's granting P1. I am not granting P1 because of the definition. The second part of it, restate the second part again. It's not okay to kill a human organism unless what?
And this is what I want to get into, because you said unless there's like self-defense, but yeah, unless there's high risk of severe harm. So like
high risk of severe harm to what?
To the person who's doing the direct and purposeful killing. Or
what about defense of others?
Yeah, even somebody else. So like if my kid was at high risk of severe harm and I had to use lethal defense against somebody else, another human organism, to defend my kid, that would be justified.
Okay. What about if you're? What if? Hold on. What if somebody was a severe risk and trying to kill your dog? Would it be okay for you to shoot and kill that person to prevent them from killing your dog?
Yeah. This does not hold only to human organisms, but
at least really? Human organisms. You think it's morally okay to murder a human being because they are going to kill your dog? So I'm a drunk driver, or I'm mad and I'm taking it out on your dog, and you think it's okay to shoot somebody and kill them for that?
Yeah, I don't agree with the word murder, but yeah, I think it's okay to use lethal self-defense to save my property or my dog.
Whoa, okay, well, this just took a turn I wasn't expecting. So you think it's okay for you to shoot somebody and kill them to prevent them from making off with one of your DVDs?
No.
You said your property.
If somebody is breaking into my house, I have a...
No, that's not what I'm asking. It's just, I was trying to take it to a different type of being, but you took it to property, so I want to explore that.
Yeah.
Where is it okay? Texas has some weird edge cases where you can get away with shooting somebody in defense of property, but there's a lot of caveats, and most of the people don't understand those caveats. So I want to understand this. What property do you think you can defend? Theft. We're talking about theft, is what you said. What theft would justify killing a human being?
I think, all bodily autonomy is based off of property rights. If I don't have rights to property, I don't have my own body.
You didn't just bring up bodily autonomy in defense of being pro-life, did you?
So let's take it one thing at a time. One thing at a time. One thing at a time.
It's okay to kill somebody to defend your bodily autonomy. Is that what you just said?
Do you disagree that you can kill somebody? You can't kill somebody to defend?
I think where Jim is going is, if we jump forward in an argument, we think what you're going to say is you can't kill the fetus in the name of bodily autonomy of the mother is going to be your position.
Yeah, because
unless there's high risk of severe harm. If there's high risk of severe harm, then use lethal self-defense.
But okay, so then let's go back to the dog.
Oh,
let's go back to the dog. Let's stay methodological about this. First, dog and property. You think it's okay to kill somebody to protect your property. What property do you think it's okay to kill somebody over?
I mean, if you're coming into my house,
I didn't say coming. Let's leave trespassing, burglary, invasion. That's not what I'm talking about. The facts are, you're walking down the street, you're selling DVDs on the sidewalk, and somebody walks by, grabs your DVD and runs off with it. You can kill them under your what you said previously. Is that correct?
Then I'd probably change my answer to unsure.
You're not sure whether it would be morally justifiable to shoot somebody when they shoplifted your DVD. You're not sure about that answer.
Correct.
I'm very worried about you.
Yeah, I would like to get back to the causing harm thing. Somebody has a cancer that is incurable and will continue to cause them harm. Is it okay for them to kill themselves, or is it okay for you to kill them to prevent further harm to themselves?
I would say it's not okay for anyone to.
But they have bodily cancer
autonomy.
Is harming them, and it can't be cured, and the cancer is going to continue to harm them. So, where do you stand on that?
Do they have bodily autonomy or not? Can they control their own body?
To kill a human organism?
Themselves.
Yeah, a human being.
Sure. Then, sure. If it's going to prevent high risk of severe harm, then you have a right to use lethal force.
How high? What percentage risk? How do you? What's the denominator of your math?
Question, but whatever that answer is, it needs to be held equal to every single human organism. Otherwise, it's just.
This is crazy.
What's the word I'm looking for? It's
unclear, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Yeah.
As in somebody who has tried to write legislation before, let me tell you, you're trying to write a rule that will be unenforceable for vagueness under the United States Constitution. You need to get some specific here. So,
without special pleading a fetus or a zygote, what human organism would it be okay to kill without high risk of severe harm?
I just said if I had on my fingertip a fertilized egg, which under your definition is a human organism, it would be okay, as in there was no moral judgment or obligation attached to the ability of me to just irradiate it instead of, if I had the power, to save it, right? That's the extreme example. The earliest form of the human organism under your definition would be a fertilized egg. So that there is no problem with just destroying that fertilized egg. You seem to disagree with that, correct?
Yes, I disagree with that.
Okay, why?
I said without special pleading of it being either a zygote or a fetus.
No, why do you disagree What logic are you using to say that it shouldn't be done? Where does that moral judgment come from? That's the part I'm interested in.
It's a human organism. So if you apply
that's just stating a fact. I want to know why.
If you apply that to any other human organism, if you kill it because it's on your finger, then that wouldn't be right. If you apply that to a 5-year-old who's on your finger.
Okay. Yes, but you gave me the definition of human organism, so I had to then say I don't always agree with your premise. I'm obviously not arguing for murdering 5-year-olds or 1-day-olds or 9-month-old who are still in the womb. I'm not arguing for that. So don't straw man us there. I want to know why you think it's wrong for somebody to terminate the existence of a fertilized egg, period. That's the question I'm answering you. Please do not try to dodge away from that specific question. Why is that wrong?
It's wrong to hurt that fertilized egg because if you apply the rule equally to all human organisms,
I'm not proposing that. I'm not proposing that. I explicitly just told you I am not arguing that you can kill a human because they're on your finger. I am asking in this one case, okay? Let's say we're passing a law and it says it's okay to do this, and we're not passing a law about anything else. This law is now up for debate. You're in Congress and you're trying to argue why we should not pass the law that says it's okay to take a fertilized egg and put it in chlorine or something, right? Just kill it. Why is that specific thing wrong? Not why is any other killing wrong? Why is that thing wrong?
Because that kills a human organism.
That's a redundancy. That is a circular argument. It's wrong to kill humans because it's wrong to kill humans.
Oh, okay, sorry. So you're asking why killing humans is wrong?
No, I'm asking you why killing a fertilized egg is wrong. You have defined it as a human organism, right? I might not define it as a human organism. Okay.
Well, science.
It's definitely not a human being. What people would say is a human being. Is it a human organism? We can talk about that. I am asking, and the fact that you are unwilling to answer this question tells me a lot about your position. I want to know once and for all why killing, quote unquote, destroying, let's call it, a fertilized egg is morally wrong. Where do you get that?
Gotcha. So if I'm coming from a secular humanist standpoint, it goes against the flourishing of human organisms if we just start killing human organisms. And that's secular humanism.
No, it's not. First of all,
and that's premise 2. That was premise 2.
No. So the what you just asserted there is it goes against the flourishing of human organisms, right?
Yes, I would say that.
So that smuggles in a bunch of things. First, it smuggles your definition of human organism into your claims about secular humanism.
That's the scientific.
You're not listening at this point. You're just talking. I'm asking you a question. So the problems with that are, one, you need to demonstrate how this affects the flourishing. I would think that would be some sort of case-by-case basis. 2, it ignores the bodily autonomy of the person who might be doing this. 3, it smuggles your definition of human organism into the sort of framework of secular humanism, which I don't think anybody would agree with that definition. So there's a lot of problems there. What are your thoughts, Jim?
I think he has no idea what he's talking about from the jump, especially if he's trying to make a secular humanist argument without understanding what human flourishing is. I think you're also, Gohan, completely wrong to assume that abortion kills a human fetus. So I don't disagree with P1. I disagree with P1 because my disagreement with P1 is that an abortion is a medical procedure that terminates a pregnancy. It does not always end up with a dead fetus. So, for instance, a cesarean C-section that happens before the end of the pregnancy would technically be an abortion, unless I'm completely wrong. And we do have, if you really want to get into the medical side, we can bring a medical expert in here. We do happen to have Dr. Ben sitting back here And
well, Dr. Ben probably doesn't want to be bugged by that at this point. I think our listeners know where Gohan's going. Gohan, I think what we probably need to do is reframe this. Why don't you just real quickly give us your premises and your conclusion in a whole? I won't interrupt you, so we can hear it, and then we can decide where we want to go from there, if anywhere.
And I appreciate it. I appreciate the time, but I actually would prefer more of a back and forth. You did say...
Well, just give us them all, because we both disagree with P1 for different reasons. So you can either admit that you can't overcome either one of our objections, or we just go ahead and go through the rest of them, and we can continue to show you how you're wrong on all of your premises, or maybe agree with your premises that you're right on one or two of them. Who knows? But we can do either of those things.
And the reason I'm asking for a quick summary is of just your premises and your conclusions. We do have a lot of callers, so I just want to see where you're going, give you your chance to put the argument out there, and then we can react to it and move on.
Hey, understood, and I appreciate it. But I do want to harp on one point that you said.
Okay.
You keep saying that it is my belief of human organism. Why are you not saying that as the biology stance of what is a human organism? Because it is biology.
Because I want to be very careful about language for no other reason. I just want to be very careful. And you propose this is how you talk when you're talking about debates, when you're talking about the law, when you're talking about various things. It's not like I'm saying nobody agrees with you. It's not like I'm saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you brought this definition in, so we're going to use your definition. I think in my head, when I think of a human organism, I don't think of a fertilized egg. I think of a human being that can do certain things, but that's irrelevant. So that's why I'm using the phrase your definition. It's not an attack on it. It's just you're bringing that in. We're operating under it. So I'm going to hold you responsible for that definition because you're the one who brought it in. That's all I meant.
Could we agree that scientifically that is the definition of a human organism?
No, I don't think we could agree because neither of us, and I don't know if you are, a scientist. I do think that we could look up and figure out what an organism is, and then we could debate whether or not you would classify things using the taxonomy of human versus not human. And we might come up to the conclusion that, yes, a fertilized egg is a human organism, but that doesn't answer very many questions for us. It doesn't answer the moral question, the should or the shouldn'ts. So
I think
either way, I will grant you that it's a fertilized cell. Let's just say it's a fertilized cell.
Because that also, if you want to talk about strictly in biology, we can take any cell in the human body and reduce it back down to a stem cell. And then once we have that, we can create a human from that. So, I mean, we can do quite a bit with. So the only reason I believe we're not doing it is because there are huge ethical questions.
It's called cloning.
Doing it, which a Chinese scientist just got reamed over the coals for doing something somewhat close to that with human cloning. But
let's have the premises and the conclusion.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Well, my baby is kind of going crazy, so I'm just going to talk really quick. Thank you guys for your time.
Sure. You're going to talk really quick. Are you going to give us the premises and the conclusion, or? I think he's gone. All right. Thank you, Gohan. I did hear the baby. I don't think he was ducking. I did hear.
Oh, no, I don't think he was either.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Gohan. Jim, what do you think about somebody who calls up and says, I've got this moral argument for not doing abortions, but it's okay to shoot somebody who shoplifts your DVD?
I think that is the typical lack of critical thinking on ethical issues that is typical of most Christians. And I would say every Christian nationalist. They don't think this through. They call themselves pro-life, but really they're not. And that's just one example of it. He brought up bodily autonomy. And to me, that was the most egregious things, because I will say that if you have the DNA code, that's a human being, whether we have to revert it back to a stem cell and bring it forward, whatever, you've got the DNA. That's how we define what humans are. So I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with saying anything about killing because abortion doesn't. That is a side effect, and it's an unfortunate side effect that we're not able to fix with technology at the moment, but tomorrow is a different story. But if you're going to claim bodily autonomy, you have to realize that the baby and the mother both have bodily autonomy. So if you're going to recognize that as a problem, then you haven't solved anything by appealing to bodily autonomy. You've only complicated it, which is my actual objection to abortion, is bodily autonomy. A woman can consent today to be pregnant and reject that consent tomorrow. Is it unfortunate? Sure. Is it tragic in some cases? Sure. But that's still her right. And you can't take that away if you're going to claim bodily autonomy.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think that's what it comes down to. You called it right at the beginning. You know, it's going to be an argument that women are breeders, basically. Yeah,
incubators.
Now, the reason, if he's still listening for Gohan, the reason I don't want to get into the definition of why I object to human organism to me, and again, none of us are scientists, but to me, it indicates a life form, right? Even if it's single-celled. And I don't know that a fertilized egg is a life form, because biologists, as far as I know, still debate over what constitutes life. I've taken a few classes. I know that, there's some sniff test. Does it respond to stimuli? Can it feed itself? Does it reproduce? Does it produce waste? But I'm not sure if it's a life form or not. So that's why I think it doesn't matter, because if you try to say human organism, I'm worried that we attach some sort of emotional thing, right? If I expand my definition of human organism to the sperm or the egg, all of a sudden now we're a little more emotional about that as well. And how far back does that definition go? I think the core issue is exactly what Jim said. You're bringing in bodily autonomy from one side and not the other. And that argument runs into problems down the line, and it goes to the traditional Christian concept of if you have sex, this is the typical argument, just to straw man his argument. If you have sex, you deserve what you get, no takebacks, and you can't kill the egg or the implanted egg, the zygote or whatever it is. That's their position. And then when we asked Gohan, where does that moral judgment come from? We got a dance. We didn't get a from God or whatever. He got this sort of straw manning of secular humanism.
Yeah, and this also goes back to what I said in the earlier call, is that every Christian who accepts the Bible as true is at least one, if not more, Bible verse from accepting something as moral and true that they do not currently do so.
Yep. Very good point. Very good point. Well, we've got lots of other callers. I do have a few announcements real quickly before we get to our next caller. So first, we now have a channel that houses all of the shows on the ACA in an audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There, you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, The Nonprofits, and others, all on one channel. Another way to support us is by sending in super chats. Get them in. It's a YouTube thing. We will read as many as we can while we're on the show. So if you could submit some super chats, Jim and I would love to see them, and we would give you a shout out on the air. Next up, the ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. So head to www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved. And we do mean you right there that's listening. Get off your butt. Go see what you can do to help out. Next, as always, this should be the first announcement every week. I don't know why it's near the end, but we want to thank our crew, the big, bold, beautiful people who put this show together every week. We've got video operators, audio operators, note takers, call screeners, chat moderators. They're on your screen right now. Please wave to everybody and their pets. Thank you for what you do, guys. They make everything on the air run smoothly and make it look easily, where Jim and I just have to come on and blather. Speaking of crew members, Jim, did you know that people can be an attractive crew member themselves if they want to help out?
Wow.
Yeah.
You mean they don't have to be ugly like us?
No, that's kind of my point. We have set a low bar, my friend. So
we have indeed.
If anyone out there wants to be one of those attractive crew members or be a guest on one of our shows or eventually become a host, we're always looking for people interested in being a part of our productions. So send us an email to volunteer@atheist-community.org to get involved. That's how I got started. I just emailed people. They said on the air, hey, we're looking for people. I volunteered, and I ended up here, chatting with people, getting the word out. How about you, Jim? How did you get involved?
This was back, in the before times, before COVID, and we were still shooting out of the studio, and I lived in Austin. So nice. I got a chance to sit in and fill in on a nonprofit, and then it kind of, they made some bad decisions after that, and they haven't corrected them yet. So
don't tell them. They don't listen to the show. They just look at levels on a screen. They don't hear what we're saying. All right. Next up, we have Natalie, her from Pennsylvania. I understand that she wants to make an argument for the truth of supernatural experiences. So let's pull Natalie up, and I will ask you, Natalie, how you doing? And what specifically, let me see. Is Natalie coming up? Looking at my software now. Are you there? Okay. I can hear you, Natalie. Thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing really well.
Excellent. Excellent. What would you like to talk about today?
So I personally believe in the supernatural, and that's kind of the basis of my own pagan religion.
Okay.
Essentially, I grew up atheist, but then I always kind of had an interest in the supernatural and religion and stuff like that. I began to look into it. And then I realized that paganism passed my personal burden of proof. So I looked it up, and there are a lot of people having supernatural experiences. I looked it up on Google, and apparently 60% of Americans have had a supernatural experience. So if you were to adjust that, there are more than 300 million Americans. And then, you can at least say maybe there are at least 100 million real people in America claiming to have a supernatural experience, however might play with the numbers in the YouGov poll. So I'm thinking, they can't all be wrong.
Can't they?
Can't they?
Well, I mean, they only need.
Let me ask you a framing.
You could have said the same thing about 60% of the population of Europe believing in a flat Earth.
Right. So let me ask you a framing question, and then I'd love to hear Jim's thoughts on this after you give us an answer. The framing question is, could you please define supernatural or supernatural experience?
Well, there are a lot of experiences. One of the most common was seeing a ghost.
I want to interrupt you because you're about to give me an example. I'm asking for a definition. How do I tell when an experience is supernatural versus normal, not supernatural? What's the criteria?
That's a very good philosophical question because it's very hard to know
if
something is specifically natural or supernatural. But, for the sake of, clarity, let's just say they're contacting or they're experiencing a non-human intelligence, because that could also include aliens or Bigfoot or ghosts or anything like that,
What about my dog?
That would not count.
Okay. So what type, how do I'm contacting, whatever that means, some sort of intelligent that is, or do you mean extraterrestrial?
Extraterrestrial would count.
Like outside of Earth. Maybe it's in a different dimension, maybe it's aliens. So if it's an alien, wouldn't that be natural?
I suppose so, yeah.
So what makes something supernatural, not natural?
Well, the way I figured it, and this is a really kind of complex idea that's several rows down the line of reasoning, but the idea is the supernatural might be coming in from another dimension. So right now we're in the third dimension, and then there's essentially.
What is that? So you're talking about third dimension, and that has and dimensions have very specific definitions, and it doesn't sound like you're using a definition from physics or math.
Third dimension, I should avoid that language and just say a supernatural realm or a spiritual realm. Could
you define spiritual for me?
I would say etheric in nature, I would say it.
Could you
define etheric for me?
Etheric nature.
It's really hard. These are really interesting philosophical questions, which I haven't had to think about so much.
We haven't even gotten into the philosophy yet. We're just asking you to define your terms in a way that we can understand, in a way that we can test. And so far, you just keep using new words that you have to define. And so it looks like things you can't define all the way down.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and I still don't know what spiritual means because every single person I talk to uses it in a slightly different way. So I'm not trying to be facetious. You know, it's best to define terms if you're going to sort of make an argument. You made the claim that 60% of Americans have had a supernatural experience. When I hear that, my brain translates it to, first, 60% of Americans claim to have had a supernatural experience. And then my brain also modifies it to 60% of Americans claim to have an experience that they can't explain and therefore attribute it to something they call the supernatural, which could mean different things to different people. I think that's the most honest way of interpreting that poll, if it is true. But that's why I'm trying to get into the definition with you, is to figure out, are those the right definitions? Is a supernatural claim just something that you don't have an explanation for, or is it something more?
Well, the interesting thing about the supernatural being so naturally,
you're not answering the question. Is a supernatural claim, is a supernatural experience an experience that you can't explain, or is it something more than that?
Is it something I can't explain, or is it something more?
The definition, like the door closes in my house. I have no idea how that closed. Is that a supernatural experience, or is that just an experience I can't explain?
I would say that lies in an experience I can't explain, and I would not put it in the category of supernatural because that could easily just be the wind, and like 99% of the time, it's going to be completely natural. Okay,
so there's a threshold somewhere.
Yeah. Like I would say it would have to be like a very like visible physical thing. Like when people say they've seen a ghost, I imagine they've seen a ghost, and however that might be, it's like a real kind of like sensory based experience, you know?
Well, I've had an actual experience that some people would call supernatural. I just call unexplained, because nothing fails quite like a supernatural explanation for any phenomenon over the last 2,000 years. But the experience is basically, a buddy of mine were getting ready to take a test, an AIT in the Army, to make sure that we knew how to actually fix the radars that we were supposed to be fixing. And so he jokingly went up and said some vaguely Latin-sounding words, waved his hands and fingers, and said, "Now our radar is cursed." I said, "Thanks, guy." And then we walk up to the radar, we turn it on, and the radar starts to rotate backwards, making this horrendous groaning noise and shuddering. And we immediately turned it back off. Now, the radar clearly wasn't working correctly, but that was not what the test was. Because when we tried to figure it all out, the instructors were just let us go. Everything that we found, and our instructors later confirmed, was that there is no way for the radar to rotate backwards, that there are safeguards in place to keep that from happening. So what would be your explanation of that? Would that be a natural cause or a supernatural cause for this radar rotating backwards?
Well, while there may be many natural explanations, if I were to see that myself, and if everything else, I'd actually probably assume it was like demonic or something, because...
Why?
Why? Well...
Why would you assume it's demonic without any evidence that it's demonic? Or any evidence that demons exist?
I would essentially just take the experience as it is and say, well, Occam's razor, it's like, it's doing weird things, it's acting like it's cursed. You just kind of pretend it's cursed.
Occam's razor, therefore it's cursed. And
yeah, so this doesn't, Occam's razor doesn't work. Because let me put it to you this way. Throughout recorded history, we have had phenomena whose cause was thought to be supernatural.
Yeah.
And I'll limit it just the last 2,000 years. Over the last 2,000 years, not a single one of those supernatural causes has been proven true, and we have found natural causes for almost everything. So if you're going to use Occam's razor, you have to first prove that the supernatural is even possible. And so far on this call, you haven't been able to provide us valid, testable, usable definitions for anything. And you're taking an experience and going, I don't know, therefore the supernatural, which is just simply a logical fallacy. So how do you get there? How do you get to Occam's razor from a failure rate of, let's call it 100% for supernatural explanations for any phenomenon?
Well, for one, to address the whole argument, I would not say that I require scientific proof. I think we are.
I'm not saying you do.
Okay, so the question was,
how do you get to Occam's razor being the supernatural, given the 100% failure rate of the supernatural being the cause for any known phenomenon?
I would not say that the supernatural has been disproved 100% of the time.
Here's a way of rephrasing what Jim is saying. I think you're misunderstanding it. There's a singer named Tim Minchin. He's a very good singer, very funny guy. He wrote the musical Matilda and Groundhog Day, did a bunch of stuff. One of his songs is a beat poem called Storm. I highly recommend you go watch it because you are the character named Storm, and I mean that in a good way. But one of the lines in that song is, throughout history, every mystery ever solved has turned out to be not magic. And that is what Jim is pointing out. Throughout history, every time we have taken something that was a mystery, the Scooby-Doo gang pulls off the mask. It's not a ghost. It's not a monster. It's the dude who runs the water slide, right? Every time we figured it out, we've never had an experience where we're like, oh, we figured it out. It's God. We figured it out. It's ghosts. We've always taken these things where people have said it's supernatural. And then when we figure it out, it's like, oh, no, it's static electricity or it's wind currents in my house, to use your example, right? So does that make his question clear? Like, how do you reconcile that with your position that you are assuming supernatural on some of these cases?
Well, I would say the vast majority of supernatural experiences have been effectively unsolved. So there have been a few that have been solved, and they have had scientific explanations. But like,
so
let me ask the question.
Supernatural.
Let me ask the question a different way. You said 60% of Americans claim to have had a supernatural experience. Do you think every single one of them is right?
No.
Okay. How can you tell which ones are right and which ones are wrong?
For the most part, I can't.
Okay. Doesn't that mean you are making this up? If you don't have a method to distinguish between what is a supernatural experience and what is not, doesn't that mean it's a distinction without a difference? It's all just stuff we can't explain?
Well, to some degree, if you see like a Bigfoot or a ghost in your attic, then it's a ghost. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable explanation.
No, it's not a reasonable explanation. Have you ever seen a ghost? Have you ever captured a ghost? Do we know how ghosts come about? Do we know the physics of ghosts? Are they tachyon particles that had their polarity reversed, like on Star Trek? Like, we have no examples of a ghost. I have tons of examples of humans creating optical illusions and holographs and putting on cloaks over their heads. Every explanation I know for a ghost is natural. I have no explanations for a ghost sighting that is supernatural. All I have is a bunch of cheap-ass shows on TV that try to trick people into thinking that there's ghosts around. So it's not reasonable, is what we're saying, to say, you say it's a ghost, therefore it's a ghost.
Well, I would say that we can't ever prove the supernatural because there's no way to scientifically prove that it was a ghost.
Bingo.
Well, no, that's not true. We can. I mean, that's literally what science does, right? If you want to claim that there's a ghost, you're going to define its properties, and we can test to see if those properties actually exist.
Yeah, but to her point, if we do that, it's not going to be a ghost anymore. It's going to be, oh, it was the alien. It was the dude who ran the water slide. It's, you know, like, right. I think what your point is,
yeah,
you know, if it's truly something that doesn't want to be found, it's not going to be found. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Yeah. Any natural explanation, no matter how ridiculous, right, is more likely than the supernatural explanation. That's the problem you're running into by saying Occam's razor, right? Yeah. Because the number, if you want to say that aliens came down and resurrected Jesus Christ, that explanation, completely ridiculous as it is more likely than actually somebody than a miracle claim. And it doesn't matter what it is. If you want to say you're praying to God, to some God has some effect in the world, that's testable. And it's been tested, right? Mm-hmm. The Templeton Foundation, a Christian organization, tested the efficacy of prayer. And what they found is that it has no effect on medical outcomes. In fact, they found that there is a slight increase in adverse outcomes yep. if the person being prayed for knew they were being prayed for. It's not a lot. It's just a percent. I think it's less than a percentage point. But even they admit that nothing fails quite like prayer to have any effect. So if you're going to say that the supernatural exists, then you're going to have to show here's a cause and here's an effect. And that these two things are that this cause is actually causing the effect. And you can't do that with a supernatural.
No.
Not if you define it as I think you're defining it, which is sort of the untestable. It's a version of Christianity saying, well, God doesn't want to be tested, and even though there are verses where God is tested all the time and proves himself, et cetera. So I think what I would recommend, well, let me ask you one more question before we go. Mm-hmm. You've heard of psychics, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard of Uri Geller?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Okay. He could bend spoons with his mind, right?
I think that's the story, yeah.
Yep. So he went on Johnny Carson, went on lots of shows. He would bend spoons. He would bend keys. He gave Barbara Walters, famous reporter, a bent key. Was it Barbara Walters? I'm thinking.
No, he went on the Carson show. Johnny Carson, of course, debunks this stuff all the time.
That's where I'm going with this. But he did, there was this one moment where, I think it's the Amazing Randy, who was a former magician, much like Houdini, who later in his life went around debunking this stuff. Houdini shared a password with his wife. And when he died, was it him that died? And then his wife tested out the psychics, or vice versa. But one of them went around waiting for any psychic in the world to give them his password, and they never could do it. Amazing Randy was a magician. He went around debunking psychics and people who claimed the supernatural. And he had to break it to Barbara Walters that her bent key was worthless. And then he pulled out a key and did Uri Geller's trick right in front of her. And Barbara Walters was so disappointed. And that was the point I was getting to. She was so disappointed. Like, why did you have to break this spell for me? And I'm worried that you're in that spot, that you want to believe, that you want there to be magic in the world. I would really encourage you to go listen to Storm by Tim Minchin, because he ends it by saying, why do we have to sully this magical thing? Isn't this enough? Isn't this universe, this cosmos enough? Why do we have to sully it with man-made monsters and legends? And I think your desire to want to believe is making you make these arguments where you are at the edges. You are admitting, I can't prove any of this. It's just something I accept. And I think that's risky behavior. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Well, I think you mentioned James Randi and the James Randi Foundation, and James Randi himself, since 1968, has offered $1 million for anybody who could prove any type of supernatural claim. Mm-hmm. And nobody has claimed the $1 million. Nobody. Uri Geller was proven to be a complete quack on Johnny Carson, who's not a magician, the talk show host.
And Amazing Randy did that. He told Carson, "Oh, don't let him use his own stuff." And then live on Carson, Uri Geller had to go, "I'm not feeling it tonight." The standard supernatural excuse.
And that is, as soon as you go to examine this stuff, nothing fails like his claim of a supernatural ability.
So
because
this
somebody would have
your
claimed it's $1 million.
Yeah. No, this enhances what you said earlier, even. Like, not only do we never have an explanation where, oh, it's supernatural, we also have explanations where people do this intentionally to deceive people all the time. Uri Geller is just one of John Edward. Like, Google John Edward and how much money he made off of grieving parents who wanted to talk to their dead children one more time. And he was proven to be just a cold reader who could make it sound like he was talking to dead people. And he rips people off. So that's why I get worried when I hear people wanting to believe so much, because it makes you vulnerable, makes you gullible, and not in the bad sense, just in the definitional sense. Like you're easily believing things that you're not demanding more evidence. So I would encourage you to look into that a little more, Natalie. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would say that, like you said, I do try to be skeptical. I do know that there are fakers out there. I do know that there are experiences where people have been debunked. I would say my personal burden of proof is different and more based on kind of common sense, rational argument, and not really scientifically based. So
it's common sense that the world is flat. That's my answer to that. Physics is common sense until it's not.
I would say that I'm kind of talking about something that is not in the realm of science. I mean, the flat Earth has been debunked conclusively, scientifically speaking.
But it's common sense to claim that it is. You actually have to go beyond just your ability to use your mind or to use your eyes to determine that the Earth is not, in fact, flat.
For a lot of things, but not for everything. I would say there are forms of knowledge that don't require.
So when you say knowledge, do you know what the formal definition of knowledge is?
What's the formal definition of knowledge?
Justified true belief.
Yeah. I would
now,
say
there's problems with that definition I don't want to get into.
Yeah, that's one definition.
You can't say that there's different forms of knowledge without being able to justify the belief and that belief be true, because that's basically what knowledge is. So you can go point at the Far East, but yet the Far East, when you get into their philosophy, they use the same rules that the Greeks do for philosophy, because that is just what it is. You can go point at they for almost everything. So there isn't just different bases of knowledge. That makes no sense. There's simply what we know to be true, and whether or not we can justify the belief.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm kind of okay with a lot of it being unknown and unexplained. However, I
think I agree with you.
Yeah, like I'm fundamentally okay with a lack of scientific proof or burden of proof or anything like that. I would say science exists in a form of proof or knowledge that's completely separate from what I would place my faith or my trust or my belief in the supernatural in. So, like, for example, I would just kind of say, well, it's kind of impossible for them all to be wrong, because out of that, 100 million or whatever, only one of those experiences have to be real for it.
Do you know that is just by definition a logical fallacy, what you just said? Like, it is a classic. You open a textbook of logic and you go to the sections on logical fallacies. One of the first 10 will be argumentum ad popularum, argument from popularity. It's true because a lot of people claim it is true. It's just not how the world works. As Jim said earlier, 100% of the people on this planet believed the Earth was flat until a certain date. Mm-hmm. They were all wrong. And it doesn't matter how many people believe a thing. Mm-hmm. That should just be basic logic. Like, shouldn't be controversial. The fact that you have to bring it up to say, well, they can't all be wrong is like, well, that's the whole point, is that they could all be wrong. They could have experienced things, sure. But then for them to say it's supernatural, a word that most people in my experience can't even define, and to claim that somehow this falls into that undefinable category, and then have people like just accept that without any evidence, there lies disaster. There lies gullibility. There lies victimhood at the expense of people who would take advantage of somebody who is training their brain to accept things based on how they want to feel rather than on evidence. And that's why I'm worried. I don't think you should go around accepting things without sufficient evidence. I just don't.
I always try to reserve a certain element of doubt or reserve skepticism for any kind of experience. It's more that I take it in like a large clump, and I'm saying, well, for one, flat Earth has been debunked, ghosts have not been definitively debunked. It's still a realm which science is ultimately unsure about. I mean,
do you believe things until they're disproven?
Do I believe things until they're disproven? Generally speaking,
do you believe things when they are proven to you? Which is the better way to go about living your life? I don't accept somebody's claims until I have sufficient evidence, or I'm going to believe whatever you say until I can disprove what you're saying.
I would definitely say I'm going to trust in someone's experiences and just assume it's right, and I'm not more on the I don't need them to prove it's right.
So what is it about human? How do you determine that whatever somebody experienced actually happened? Because our brains are notoriously bad at figuring things out.
Yeah, you can trust
perceiving the universe.
Yeah, you can. There's two layers here, as Jim's pointing out. You can trust that they're being honest with you, that they think it was supernatural, but then you also have to trust that they're right. They're not themselves falling into the echo chamber of supernaturality or the gullibility or whatever you want to call it. So how do you know that they are right? Because you use the word trust, and that goes to honesty. But how do you know they're right?
Well, generally speaking, I mean, the senses are correct. Like,
no, they're not. No, they're not. They are 100% not.
Yeah.
What am I wearing, Jim?
Glasses. What am I not wearing that I usually wear? Yeah. I mean, what are we both wearing here?
What can I not see that causes my car dashboard to heat up in the sun? Ultraviolet light. Oh, there's a whole bunch of light I can't see.
Yeah.
My hearing can be fooled in the movie theaters. Okay, so my background is the law. One of the most unreliable forms of testimony is eyewitness testimony. There's a very good experiment that people have done multiple times. I remember one that was done on Nightline. A professor is giving a speech to her class when a robber comes in, grabs her purse off of her podium, looks at the class for a second, and runs out the door. The class thinks this is real. In fact, some people give chase, and security has to stop them. And she turns around and says, okay, the cops are going to get him. Let's go on with class. They then interview everybody in class who were sitting not 20, 30, 40 feet away from this guy and ask him to do a sketch artist. The sketch artist sits with all of them and they draw a picture. Vastly disagree. Their verbal comments of what he looks like, vastly disagree. The color of his jacket, whether his hood was up or down, whether his glasses were glasses or sunglasses, vastly disagree. There's one thing that they all agreed on, and that was that he had a funny looking nose. Well, you know why they agreed that he had a funny looking nose? They went back and played the tape for all of these students, and the professor who was in on this, after the guy left and she was telling them all to settle down, as a side note into her mic said, wow, that guy had a weird nose. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. There were people who would have sworn under oath that this guy's nose was broken. In fact, one of them, when they were interviewed by the reporters from Nightline, they interviewed them all, said it was insistent. No, his nose was broken. His nose, it was crooked. It was weird. They went to the point of bringing the actor out who played the thief. And the guy got up to his nose and was like, well, it's a little diagonal. It's a little, like, he couldn't process the idea that he was wrong about this broken nose when we have evidence sitting there in front of us as to what was going on. So when you come to me saying the senses are always reliable, that is, quite frankly, I don't mean this in a mean way, that is one of the most laughable things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Well, the senses
And
are
there's the gorilla experiment too, right? Where
yeah.
This one's even better in some ways, because so what the scientists did was they told their the people they're experimenting on, what we want to do is we want you to watch this video of this basketball team and count how many times this player dribbles the ball, bounces the ball off the floor. At the end of it, they ask, so what did you think of the gorilla? And 100% of the people they did this on did not see the gorilla. Now, you go watch that exact same video looking for the gorilla, you can find it, but not a single person found the gorilla.
Literally, guy in a gorilla suit walking in the background. So
yeah, none of them did.
I would encourage you not to adopt the position that human senses are anywhere close to infallible.
That's with people. We're talking about people who have fully functioning senses, right? We're not talking about someone like myself who has to wear glasses and what I can and cannot see and what gets fuzzy and what isn't. We're not talking about people with tinnitus. We're not talking about people who have synesthesia, where they have two senses completely mixed up. They can see, taste and taste color. All these things are things that actually happen. And we're not even talking about, just the ability for the human mind to, to mislabel things on a regular basis. If you've ever caught something in the corner of your eye and thought something was there, that is your senses in your brain screwing with you and not doing the right thing, because it's pattern recognizing and it's coming up with the wrong conclusion. You just can't get to eyewitnesses' reliable testimony from anything we know about eyewitnesses.
Well, Natalie, I really appreciate your time. Anything to mention before you go? We got a few other callers that's getting a little late. I really do appreciate your honesty and your straightforwardness.
Thank you. Thank you for taking me.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much for the call. I really encourage you to think about that concept of the infallibility of human senses. The graveyards are filled with people who were put to death by the justice system because of eyewitness testimony, who were later found to be innocent. So the attitude, I think the real problem I have, Jim, with that attitude of what's really, I think if I'm going to boil it up, like, what's the big deal if I like to think that things are supernatural? My concern is you train your brain to accept things on looser evidence than you should demand, and you risk hurting yourself or others when you do that.
Yeah. And there's so much that we interpret badly. There's the example from that a friend of mine told me about when he was going for his concealed carry. You have an adult male grabbing a young child who is fighting them and does not want to get into the car. Can you use, and they're screaming, no, 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 I don't want to go. Can you use lethal force? And the answer is, of course, no, because under that circumstance, what you don't know is that dad is taking his son for his first haircut.
Yeah. We read a law case in law school. A daughter tells dad that neighbor has been sexually assaulting her, young daughter. Tells the dad all about how the neighbor had been sexually assaulting her. Dad goes over, kills neighbor. Turns out daughter just made it all up. So even when you have testimony of a trusted family member, you need to demand it more. The bigger the claim, I'm being sexually assaulted, this kid's getting kidnapped, the more evidence you should demand that it's true before you take drastic measures. And while you may see your belief in something as not a drastic measure, I do, because it trains your brain to accept things on flimsy evidence. And that's how you get suckers. That's how you get gullible people. That's how you get taken advantage of. Maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but soon somebody will do something to trick you, and you will possibly regret it. So I started quoting Casablanca there for a second. Sorry.
Well, if you've never read Freakonomics and you want to see see more examples, go read Freakonomics. It will, for lack of a better word, freak you out, because you have, doctors who are doing procedures because they're tired of arguing with their patients that they don't need them. And they're like, okay, fine, I'm done. You really want to do this? It's not that big a deal. We'll do it anyway. Just because they're human. Should they do that? No, they shouldn't. It's just over and over again. People are not rational. Don't assume you're rational. Don't assume you're being rational. Challenge it every time.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
No, because we're not.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, I always go back to the X-Files, if you ever watched it, the poster that says, "I want to believe." To me, that's the most ironic, engaging, interesting poster, because the idea of wanting to believe, period, full stop, is an odd sentiment. I've always liked the concept. I first heard Matt Dillahunty phrase it this way: I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. That should be everybody's goal. And then the only question that remains is, what's the best methodology to make that determination?
Right. And science is the best methodology. It's not perfect. It's not done by perfect people. And if you start with wrong assumptions, you'll end up with wrong results. And if you really want to see some really good examples, there's a TV show called Leverage, in which a bunch of criminals use their criminal skills to do good things. It's well-told stories, always entertaining, and they actually had criminal consultants and FBI consultants consulting on the show, so a lot of their stuff, yes, it's still Hollywood, is slightly more believable than it would be otherwise. But you can watch how cons work because they con people. You can watch how all of that works because that's the whole point of the show.
Yeah. And that's why I brought up John Edward. Like throughout history, there is a vast set of evidence of con men. And when I say con men, most people will think of, guy on the street that's, doing 3-card Monte. But I'm talking about sophisticated, well-spoken, well-groomed, intelligent people who rip people off on a regular basis. And they claim to be psychic. They claim to be speaking to God. They claim to all these things. And you open yourself up to that. And just the simple con man that I used earlier of, hey, give me your investment money, I'll return 10 times. And you want to believe. So don't want to believe true things. That would be my advice. And go listen to Storm by Tim Minchin and while you're reading Freakonomics. All right. We have time we have 2 more callers. I think that's probably going to be it. First, we're going to talk to KJ, him from North Carolina, wants advice on life after leaving the church / dealing with religious family. All right, KJ, thank you for your patience. Please tell us about your experience and what your questions are.
Hey, what's going on, y'all?
Hey.
So basically, I grew up in the church back in Illinois. Grandfather's a reverend, played drums in church all my life, and now I'm like a professional musician now. And I guess like over the years, I always had my questions because I was like, stuff just doesn't make sense because I'm a very, very critical thinker, and I've been like that ever since a kid. But it didn't really come into a head until I went back home for a little stint of time. And I think I was with my uncle at the time, and he basically was having conversations with me about life because I was figuring life out as a musician. And instead of like encouragement or like comfort or, things like that, it got to a very disrespectful tone where, well, have you been reading your word? And oh, you haven't been reading your word, so you're lost and you don't understand. And then I'm having conversations with my grandfather, which I'm thinking, I might have a little bit more understanding. And no, it's literally the same conversation over again. Like, you're just lost. And I was just asking questions to them, like, this just basically doesn't make sense. Can you make sense of it for me? Like, these are the questions that I have. And there's never like a direct answer. There's always this, well, if you read in your word, and I'm like, brother, that's not what I just asked you. Like, just, you know what I mean? Like, that's not what I asked you.
Oh, yeah.
How did that make you feel, like, when you got those responses?
I think at first it was initially just pure anger, because I'll give you an example. So it could be something as simple as, I would ask my grandfather, I said, hey, you know, I'm trying to figure out ways to make extra income outside of just doing music or whatever side job. And the reason why I asked him is because I know at his late age now, I know he has like investments or different things. Like he owns like 2 horses. And I'm like, I know you got bread somewhere. Wherever you put it, you did something. So I'm asking him the question thinking that I would get a logical answer back, like, okay, look, when you're looking for whatever job, make sure you do stock options versus just doing 401k by itself. Like, you know, different things I had to teach myself. And it's literally the same answer. Well, when you're in your word and you keep your faith. And I got so mad and I said, I'm asking you a simple question. And I know you did it. You have the answer. Why aren't you giving me the answer that I just asked you for?
Was there ever a back and forth about that layer that he was talking to you through, like this filter that he was pouring this through? Like, did you ever directly with either of them get to address it and say, hey, the good book aside, I'm looking for practical advice here? Were you ever comfortable making that sort of direct, hey, could we put the Bible down for a second and talk about, you know, my stock portfolio or where to get a job? And if so, how did they take that?
I would say kind of, because my grandfather would be, when we did talk about it and I was in Illinois, he was like, oh, you can get a job here, you can get a job here, you can get a job here. And I'm like, okay, so when I get the job there, like, how do I maneuver it? Because you can get a job anywhere for $10 an hour right now. It might not do much, but if you know what to do with a job for $10 an hour outside of music, you might be able to do something. So that was kind of like the behind, and he would never give the behind. He would give you just enough, but wouldn't give you the full thing that you're asking him for. And I think the last conversation I had with him was when I just basically told him, like, I don't think I believe in this anymore. And he basically said, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you're telling me that, you know, some guy 2,000 years ago died and somehow is thinking of me in 2026. And he died for sins that I don't even know if I can, you know, like it's just not going together. I'm like, make this make sense. And then his response was, well, when you were 6 and you gave your life to Christ, was that not for real? And I basically told him, I was like, I was 6 years old. Like, how do you use that as a reference? You know what I mean?
That is the best answer I've ever heard to that, because that comes up. Like, people will be like, so when you said, and you're like, I was 6. Legally, you can't even enter a contract at that age. Like, how can I put my
you know what I mean? Yeah, and it was kind of one of those things. Like, at first, I was mad about it, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna just step away because clearly I just don't believe this, because I'm a very critical guy, and I don't think like everything has an explanation for everything. Because I mean, this is a vast thing that we live on. We live on a floating rock. You know what I mean? So I mean, that in of itself is a lot. But at first it was mad, but then it got to, you know, I showed empathy to the other person, like. You've really found a way to cut your brain off. And it was kind of like, that's how I looked at it. Like, you've literally shut your brain to a certain point and said, this is the cap.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I talked to my uncle at the same time, which he's like a lot more abrasive about it, he's gotten to the point where he's like, I don't think our family is meant for money because, you know, when you read your word, the people enrich it. I mean, this is crazy when he like breaks it down.
Bringing the bad side of the prosperity gospel into it.
Yeah.
So Jim, did you grow up in a household like this? I did not grow up in a very religious household. Did you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up Catholic. We went to school every Sunday. My parents tried to get me into parochial school every place we moved to. And when I wasn't going to a parochial school, to a Catholic school, I was going to CCD in the evening, at least once a week in the evenings to learn more about my faith. And I didn't really care enough. I just wanted to get good grades because that's what was expected of me. But yeah, I mean, I had a teacher who was more upset that I couldn't memorize things than she did as to whether or not I got the concept right. And so, it was just stupid stuff like that. But when you're talking with family, I think you have to start with what is your end goal with the conversation. Because if you don't want it to deteriorate into fights all the time, then you have to set boundaries for them and for yourself, right? You probably better than we do what conversation topics will lead to a fight. And if you don't want that to happen, avoid those topics as much as possible. Tell them what your boundaries are if it keeps happening, and then hold them to it. Seems to be about the best piece of advice possible. Because I'm not an out atheist to my parents. I don't care if they know or not. But there's just, for me, I know there's no way that conversation ends without a fight. So why have it in the first place? It affects nothing between me and them. So I don't care. They don't force me to go to mass. They haven't, for years. If I show up at Christmas, they don't force me to go to Christmas mass or Easter. So, those things just don't come up because they know those are my boundaries. And do they know I'm an atheist? I have no idea. It's not like I'm hiding it on social media. So,
how about you, Coach KJ? Have you gotten to the point where you've had any sort of boundary type conversations about, listen, I understand that when you seek guidance, you look for, as you said, being in the book. When I'm seeking guidance, I'm looking for something more practical. So do you mind if we not talk about that and we talk about other things? Have you had that conversation with anyone?
I've had it a couple of times, actually.
How did it go?
With my grandma. It kind of went into like a circle. So I think I was having a conversation with my uncle, and I was just like, hey, we don't need to have this conversation. And I kind of didn't delve into it. I was just like, I don't want to have this conversation right now. And it would always go back into the you're lost, you're looking into the world to understand things, and the world will lie to you. And and then I kind of just shut down. Because I'm like, I don't even know what to say, because clearly the boundary, you don't know how to respect them. You know what I mean?
Do you want to have an ongoing relationship with some or all of your family members? Is that something you're still striving to save?
I would like to, just for the sense of having community as far as family, but I know personally for myself that it is getting to that point. Like, I may have to just put you to the side and let you just do what you do, because it doesn't bother me what they believe in. That's fine. If it gives you comfort, fine, do it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have to accept me for me, just the same way that I'm accepting you for you. But then it's like, well, for me in my mind, I'm like, well, if we were going back to the book you told me that I don't understand, that's what you should be doing anyway. So it's a weird thing to me.
Yeah, I will agree with what Jim was saying earlier, and I will add that you need to decide how much of that sort of situation you want to put up with and how much you want to try to negotiate, right? I think there's a negotiation that can take place. I've not had to go through it, but I've spoken to people who have done it. I've listened to lots of people who've shared their experience having it. And it goes something like this. You approach a family member and you just let them know, hey, I'm still the same person you ever knew. My opinion about a few things has changed. I'm questioning these things, and it makes me uncomfortable to talk about them right now. Would you mind that when we're together, we sort of stay off of that topic and we focus on other things? Because I really love you and I want to spend time with you and I value your opinion, et cetera, et cetera. And then have that conversation. And if it keeps happening or if they don't agree, then you need to decide if you're drawing a line. And that's when you have this statement to say, hey, I asked you respectfully, I asked you politely, I'm still the same person, I haven't changed, my opinion has, but you seem not to respect my desires with respect to let's without using so many words, stop talking about religion to me, stop preaching to me. If this keeps up, then I'm going to have to insert whatever you're going to do here, reconsider our relationship, stop coming over for the barbecue, whatever it is that you're going to tell them to do. Do you think you'll ever be at a point where you're willing to sort of, you know, draw that line? Or as to Jim's point, you know, it's no skin off of my back if they want to be. It's a little different because they're not pushing him. Your family is pushing you. But if you could get to a point where you had that line and they respected it, would that be good for you? And what would happen if they didn't respect that line?
Me personally, I can. It doesn't bother me, like setting that tone. To them, I know it would just turn into more disrespect. Because, you know, even though I had that conversation with my grandfather, I could talk to him about something so practical, and then he will purposely at the end of the call, like, yeah, so lead us in prayer. I'm like, bro, word. And it's, you know, and I'm a biracial guy. So it's like, you know, being biracial, so half my family's white, half my family's black. And it's like, as soon as you tell somebody black this conversation, it's like you've almost skinned your body alive. So it's like, man.
That makes it even harder, right?
Man.
You got a foot in two worlds on two different axes. You got the, you know, white-black world that you're trying to straddle and the religious and unreligious world that you're trying to straddle. That's got to cause a lot of anxiety. How long has this been going on?
Oh, for years, man. Okay. I mean, because for my rationale, I know, like, my grandfather was a reverend. At the time in his life, he was very abusive to, like, my mother, you know, my aunts, my uncle. And, you know, at the same time that he's like the super abuser, he's the reverend at the same time. Yep. You know what I mean?
Yep. And it's not unheard of, and I'm sorry you had to go through with that. It's a common phenomenon. There is a subreddit that I like to quote all the time called Pastor Arrested. Just r/pastor arrested. And all they do is they post stories about pastors getting arrested, usually not convicted or whatever. And on a daily basis, at least once a day, you see articles of pastors getting arrested for sexual assault, beating people, stealing money, doing all of these things. A lot of pedophilia, child porn possession, all that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that's, you know, you decide, you know, the situation with your family, but there's something about the deference that society and community gives to a pastor that makes it very attractive to people who want to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things, when I got like to maybe 20, I used to come to my family and say, well, this happened, and that's why you act the way that you act, which, okay, we can start to figure it out. Let's have these conversations. And it's always, we let that go. We prayed on that, and we gave that to God. And I'm like, but you still act like that, though. So that's not solving the problem.
Yeah, giving it to God is one of the best get-out-of-jail-free cards I've ever heard. Like, when people say that, I'm like, you're just abdicating your role to being a thinking person. Like you said, you're a critical thinker. I don't know their motivations. They could genuinely be very, very faithful and are very scared about what they see for you, or they could be just trying to control the situation. I don't know. You'd have to use that judgment. Do you have any final words for KJ, Jim?
Yeah, I would say find your local atheist group. I just put in North Carolina Atheist, and Triangle Free Thought Society and Charlotte Atheists and Agnostics both came up. I don't know how close you are to Charlotte, and I think Triangle is out of Raleigh, Durham.
And they also, a lot of them will meet online as well.
Yeah. And the other good news is if you're anywhere close to UNC Chapel Hill, Bart Ehrman, an atheist Bible scholar, is also there. You know, so I find your local atheist groups and hang out with them. And if you're ever in Austin, of course, come into the library and hang out at the ACA. Don't know how often people are there during the week anymore, but at least on Sundays, there's folks there usually. But find those groups. And online works too. I think in person sometimes works better. But there are a number of places online, Facebook, et cetera, where you can become part of that community, and that will help. There is also, what's the other group? Is it Black Non-Believers?
I was going to recommend that, yes.
Yeah.
Cynthia, I think, is part of that as well, who has participated with Atheist Experience.
Yeah, Black Non-Believers is another organization that have affiliates. Looks like throughout the South, according to the map here. So I don't know if there's anything close to you, but they also have every year a convention that you might want to look at as well, and meet some folks there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I agree with
the local atheist community.
Yeah, finding community outside that can share your experience. I think the Black Non-Believers is a perfect example of. There are very specific groups out there. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself, but it's nice to be able to go there and have people share that experience of, how in the Black community it's a little bit different and it's this way, or there's extra pressure to be religious and all of that sort of stuff, and then you can get sympathy and shared experiences that way. So that's definitely a huge part that I've seen work for people, is just your family's your family, but your friends are your family that you choose. So you can go build that family and that support network elsewhere. And then I would also, it's up to you how much you want to pursue that relationship with your own family. But at some point, for your own mental health, I think it's important to draw a line, like you would with any other friend. Listen, you keep doing this, I keep asking you to stop. It means you don't respect me, that I wouldn't say this, but it means they value their faith or their desire to keep believing more than they care about you and your mental health. And if you can find a good way to say that that won't make them storm off or whatever, or tell you to go get an exorcism, then I would encourage you to do that. But at some point, you have to decide where that line is. So thank you, KJ, for calling in. Please call back if you have developments. If you have any conversations, please let us know how it went.
All right. Thank you so much, man. Y'all enjoy your day.
You too. Thank you. All right. We have one more caller. We'll do quickly. I do have some super chats, Jim. So I think we should read some of those, because one of them answers a question you had.
Okay.
Jonathan J. France, for $1.99, told us a very important message. The square root of 1,333 is 31,622. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the super chat. So thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that.
And they did the math. It was not the fast part of the brain that did that.
It's not. I feel that that's the answer. That is the answer. Rodney's Bert. Rodney Siebert, maybe. There we go. 4274 for $1.99 just said, awesome episode. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think we've had some great callers. And then finally, we have Crispin Slit, member for 2 months, donated a pound. A pound of what? I don't know, but I think it's a pound of British sterling, maybe. So thank you very much for your contribution. Those go a long way to helping us keep this show going and the others that the Atheist Community of Austin runs. So thank you. Ready for one last call?
Yeah, let's do it.
Jim, there is a Jim on the line.
Uh-oh.
Jim is a him from Missouri, asking why theists bring up near-death experiences. We're running a risk of trying to, speak for other people, but Jim, could you expand upon that? Caller Jim, could you expand upon that? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, you're on, Jim. Sorry, we couldn't hear you for a second.
Okay.
Take it away.
Yeah, no problem. The reason I always find that weird is, for all we know, when they bring up somebody who had a near-death experiences, it could just be a story they're making up. Say, well, you can't explain this, can you? And then be like, well, I don't know, because I wasn't there. And again, I always say this: you want to bring up somebody who's been dead and came back to life. Here on February 15th, 2026, you want to really bring me a convincing argument? Bring up John F. Kennedy. He's been dead for 60 years. I think he would know. not someone who's been dead for a minute.
Have you ever heard of Alex Malarkey, properly named Alex Malarkey?
Admittedly, no.
He was a boy who at 6 years old was paralyzed in a car accident and went into a coma and told his parents when he came back that he went in heaven, met God and the angels and all that stuff. Was very convincing to the point where they wrote a book called The Boy Who Came Back from Heaven, a remarkable account of miracles, angels, and the life beyond this world. This was in 2010, 2009. In 2015, he officially recanted that story, stating that he did not die and go to heaven and that he made the story up for attention. That is one of a many, 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 many examples of how you could find a more plausible explanation of this child's experiences, claimed experiences, than the supernatural one of, oh, he literally went to heaven.
Yeah, and a lot of them do it because people who have NDEs appear to have some sort of religious experience based on that. Without getting into the frauds, we can accept that as true and still not accept that their experience is something real, because that's what you have to do, right? We can simulate religious experiments with drugs. And we can simulate near-death experiences with drugs. And we know that the brain is for lack of a better word, and Dr. Ben, plug your ears on this one, a chemical soup, from a certain point of view. And so chemicals doing chemical things just makes some sort of sense. So they have to take these NDEs and they have to prove that they actually are something real that the person experiences and not just something that they experience that happens between their ears. It just doesn't work that way. And so far, every time somebody talks about some specific NDE, what you end up reading is essentially a scientifically written news report of what the person experienced. You don't have any attempt to eliminate variables. You don't have any attempt to recreate the near-death experience. Now, granted, part of that is ethical considerations. It's not considered ethical to kill somebody just to bring them back to life again. For some definition of kill. And so these things, but that's why they bring it, is because you have these experiences that they feel can't be explained any other way, and yet we have other ways to experience it. It's just if I'm being charitable, I'll give them, okay, NDEs are a thing we can't explain, but that doesn't prove the supernatural. I think we do have perfectly good explanations. So sometimes I don't even want to get into the NDE things. They'll find out, granted, how does that prove that your God exists? Because what most people, Christians who claim NDEs prove God, don't want to acknowledge that Hindus also have NDEs that have Hindu experiences, and Islamic folks who have NDEs have Islamic experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And they go, oh no, it's all heaven. And then they'll point to, somebody who was a Buddhist or Islamic or Hindu who became Christian after their experience. Okay. Fine.
This is relatedly, people, when asked to draw the aliens that they visited or who abducted them prior to a certain point in time, drew a whole array of images. And then after, I think it was Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, all those pictures for alien abduction started looking like the little gray men with the big black eyes. There's so many other mundane explanations for what people are experiencing. There's even studies that have been done about this. There was something called AWARE, which stands for Awareness During Resuscitation. Dr. Sam, I call him Dr. Sam, Deparnia, I think it was, placed cards on top of shelves around hospital areas like the emergency room where cardiac resuscitation was most likely to take place. This was targeted at more like out-of-body experiences, near death, there's a mixture there, but the idea was people previously had claimed, oh, my body was floating up and I was looking down at the people operating me and stuff. So he said, okay, we'll install shelves, we'll put these cards that only somebody that's floating above would see, and we'll ask anybody that claims this, what did you see on the cards? And nobody saw anything, of course. So that was run multiple times. There could be other explanations, of course, but every explanation we have, every test that we've run seems to indicate that when you deprive a brain of oxygen, it starts doing things, and our brains are our only way to know reality. Going back to this other caller talking about our senses being perfect, certainly not perfect when you start depriving the brain of oxygen. So, yeah, I don't know why, other than it being sort of this mystical, self-belief affirming story, like our caller that wanted to believe, like, oh, well, all these people have NDEs. There must be life after death, because not all of them could be lying or wrong or kids that were seeking attention. I think they could. What's your take, caller Jim? Have you had religious people bring this up to you?
Yes, I have. And, many times I like to look at them and say, well, can you confirm it? I mean, for all you know, this person was just trying to get their 15 minutes of fame. I always tell them, it's like, what they're like, what NDE would convince you? I say, again, bring me someone, resurrect Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he's been dead for over 100 years. He might be an expert,
That's beyond NDE. That is PDE for post-death experience, I guess.
Yeah, but my point, it's somebody can say, oh, I've been dead for a minute. It's like, well, they could, again, their brain could just be getting deprived of oxygen. I mean, some
people like to expand their definition of dead. I've met people all the time said, I died. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to get into it, but there's a lot of definitions about dying. And the one I'm most familiar with is the complete cessation of your brain activity. Did that happen? No, my heart stopped beating. And that's what they mean by died. So you can get into the semantics of it, but the Jim's point stands. As Tim said, throughout history, every mystery ever solved has turned out to be not magic. So as soon as somebody does bring that evidence back in, that they can see the cards on top after they've had their heart attack and out-of-body experience, then we'll have something to start looking at. I'm open to that. But until then, we have a bunch of people who want to believe and a bunch of people who want to make up stories so they can sell books, or genuinely just lost some oxygen to the brain, had a really, really, really a real feeling experience and told people about it. And that's about it. Thanks, Jim caller. Appreciate it. Any thoughts on that studio, Jim?
No, it goes back to what you just said and what I said earlier. Any natural explanation, no matter how ridiculous, is more likely than a supernatural explanation, because nothing fails quite like supernatural explanations for anything. And we can start with the fact that nobody can define it.
Yeah.
We can define what supernatural is. And once you start to actually look at it, it then becomes natural. And that's not our problem.
Yep.
If you're claiming the supernatural exists, that is a you problem. That is not a me problem. It's not an atheist. It's not a skeptical problem. It's a problem with the person who, and you could literally say, hey, when I do this action, when I say these words, a fireball shows up 50 feet from me and burns everything for 3 seconds. And we go in and go, every time you say these magic words, this happens. That's cause and effect. And then we can do
that's coincidence. We're not even sure if it's cause and effect.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you do it regularly enough, and you can do it 100% of the time, then we can start doing and conducting experiments. And maybe we find out that there is no natural cause, no natural link. And yet 100% of the time, I do this happens, and I can't find any natural link. You could then claim the supernatural exists.
You could claim it, but then we still are at the argument of ignorance. Like, I can't think of another way of this happening, therefore it must be supernatural. This thing that, when you boil down to it, is just a circular argument, because supernatural just tends to mean a thing I can't explain. So I can't explain it, therefore it's a thing I can't explain.
Right.
It could be a dude had a button and he was pressing it and making the fireball show up, and he was really good at hiring it, or somebody was 1 miles away.
Right.
We don't know. As Jim said, we've seen lots of crazy scams and ways that people have tried to fool people. People will go to a long way to scam people. And the fireball trick, I'm sure Jim is still working on it. I know you were trying to perfect that.
Yeah. Well, that and the get my head to spin around 360 degrees without breaking my neck. Yeah, that one too.
You've tried 3 times. The surgeries all went well.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, Jim, so much. I also, before we thank you and say goodbye, I think, of course, we want to bring on our backup host for helping out tonight. This is Dr. Ben. Hey, Dr. Ben, how you doing?
Here. Yeah, that was rough. That was rough to listen to part of the time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, not you.
I've got a horrible voice, I know. So what were your thoughts there? I know that we almost brought you on for one, but you hinted before the show. You were like, "Hey, I'm studying for something."
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? What was your sit up and take notice call, if there were any?
Yeah, I've talked to Gohan before. I have a lot of thoughts about his particular.
And he was the abortion.
The abortion call. Yeah.
Okay.
Which you both did a great job addressing that. But Gohan has a tendency to just assume he knows things, assume that he knows the variables that are missing, or assume that he knows the definitions, and it's clear he doesn't. There's a knowledge gap between the actual field and what he knows. And he's unaware of how little he knows about that. So,
tricky.
But I'm sure you all picked that up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever spoken to Gohan, but I was definitely worried about a definitional problem, and that's why I was very careful to be like, okay, I don't know if there's a consensus on what an organism is. So can we call it something else, right? Can we all just agree, fertilized egg and onward? That's what we're talking about for all intents and purposes. And he was right. He kept wanting to frame it differently.
Yeah, and to say that he just wants to use the scientific definition of organism, but then couldn't bring up that definition and didn't have a source for where we could find that definition is a bit concerning. That he doesn't have a definition.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. You just wanted us to yes and what's your next point rather than what blew my mind was hey, I can kill people over a DVD. That was just I don't want to talk to you if that's your moral stance. That's just crazy.
Yeah, and for me it was the bodily autonomy.
Yeah, that was wild. That was wild.
So funny. There is a legit question to have, right? My right to swing my fist end at the tip of your nose, right? That whole when bodily autonomy claims conflict, what do we do? That's one of those moral gray areas. But first you have to establish some claim that somebody's asserting bodily autonomy on the part of a fetus or zygote or whatever. And second, you have to then have that conversation, not just assert blanket, therefore mom has no bodily autonomy because this is all about bodily autonomy.
Yeah, that was wild.
Did we make any egregious medical mistakes? Now, I know I said one, I told you to plug your ears because I knew I was going off into a little bit of left field. Except for that, did we get too far off on?
No, you all did great. So.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
How hard is it to actually determine if somebody is dead for the purposes of near-death?
How do you define death in the medical community?
So it is related. Yeah, it's related to neurological function. Yeah. So even if your heart stops beating, you still have to confirm neurologically that somebody is deceased, and that is why even going back to the abortion call, when people are going to define life as a certain point, is it okay to pull somebody off of life support? Let's say that they didn't have something saying that they didn't want to be resuscitated. Let's say there's no documentation there. Somebody ends up being on life support and there's no way to get them off without them being deceased. Is that then murdering a human, or is that acceptable? But that's a case where like, that's why we define brain death as death, even if a heart is still beating. So I would say you all were correct on that.
So from that point of view, I mean, if we were to get someone to accept that as a definition, that still brings up problems, because at certain points, the zygote is then not technically alive because there's no nervous system quite yet, and there's no brain. So, you know, if you're going to accept that as a definition, you still have problems if you're going to make, it seems to me, with the abortion.
Yeah, and your one of your points was like absolutely hit the nail on the head for how I would address it is, oh, where was I even going with this? I had the thought, and then I lost it.
Well, I was going to point out while you're thinking about that, I was going to point out that there's a reason he kept trying to call it human organism and not human being, and that highlights the difference that Jim was talking about. Without the nervous system, without these hallmarks, it moves that matter, the cells, further and further away, what we recognize as a thing that is deserving of some special protection or rights. So I don't know, Ben, if you remember what you're talking about. But,
I do.
Okay.
I do, and it's the idea that the fetal demise is a side effect. It's a consequence of the action. Because that's something people will constantly argue is they will define it as killing of a fetus, but what it is the ending of a pregnancy. So like that point is absolutely spot on. Like, so morally speaking, the question should be on their part, how do we improve fetal viability earlier if you want to do that? And the ethical question then of how far should medical intervention be done? Like, let's say somebody terminates a pregnancy before 20 weeks. Should there be effort to do a trial of life, or should there be effort to keep the fetus viable? And that's a whole separate question and a can of worms that I think people aren't considering or ready to answer.
Yeah, if you imagine from a legal perspective what that would look like, it would be a mess of, okay, are we passing laws that say, okay, you can do abortions, but now because this technology exists, you must also do this thing. You must schedule it and be at this type of facility, have these types of certified professionals available. And if you don't do those things, now we're going to call it some crime or some civil penalty or something like that. And then as that technical line moves further and further down towards a conception to create viability, do we still give those sorts of protections? I'm not sure the Christians would actually want to live in a world where we had this magic technology that could detect every time any woman got pregnant, like literally an inseminated egg and planted in the uterus. The moment that happened, we have alarms go off. And then the minute that's at risk, we have the opportunity to intervene and save it and grow that baby in a healthy way to term. I'm not sure they'd want to live in that world because you'd have 1 trillion babies out there because that's happening so much. And there's so much natural abortion, so much natural death of the zygote or whatever, miscarriages, all that stuff. I'm not sure they'd know what to do with that much fertility, if for want of a better word.
You still have so many ethical questions.
Yeah, and with the idea that we have let's say that we can save a fresh sperm and egg zygote combination, second one, we can save that. There's still the question of bodily autonomy for the woman carrying it, whether or not she wants to have what procedure she wants to have done to her body.
I would have no problem believing that Gohan wanted this for religious reasons. We never got to that, but I have no problem believing the crowd that would want anti-abortion law would have no problem in one breath saying, I have bodily autonomy when it comes to the COVID vaccine, but you don't have bodily autonomy when we develop egg implantation detection software. We will surveil and we will have the state come break your door down and make sure that you don't have a miscarriage. I have no problem that they could have both of those positions at the same time and just say, 'cause God.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we know where this is going eventually, or not eventually, but today, because we have women who are being arrested for improper disposal of a cadaver for miscarrying.
Yep, there are states where the conservative elements have really fought to create these laws or to put people into place that are willing to take verbiage that has traditionally been interpreted one way and redefine it extrajudiciously or extra legislatively. There's no judge, there's no legislative body changing it. But when you give an executive branch person power to determine the meaning of words in legislation, you run into this. We're going to call an aborted zygote a cadaver now. Because that definition is not, that word's not defined, or it's defined loosely enough that we think we can this passes the laugh test in a courtroom, so we're going to start prosecuting people, and they will do that. You're absolutely right. It's why legislation matters. Being specific matters, and definitions matter.
Absolutely. And then in Texas, you have towns that have made it illegal to pass through them on your way to get an abortion. You can't drive through them.
I want to see some constitutionality challenges on that, because there's clauses in the Constitution that say you can't, obstruct interstate travel. You have to respect citizens from other states, all of that stuff. And I'm not up on them, but I think I'm going to be interested to watch those.
And then there's the Texas law, I think it's still in effect, that says that if you think a third party is driving somebody to get an abortion, you can report them and get paid for it.
It's the getting paid for it. It's really creepy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because you could be a Lyft driver. You pick up, or a cab driver of any kind, right? You pick up, Alice, and take Alice to a hospital. And the nearest hospital happens to be across the border. So you live on a border town between Texas and some state that allows abortions. And not know, and still be guilty and fall afoul of this law, and they don't care.
Remember, the same people that want those laws are the people who want small government. So small enough to fit in your uterus, small enough to fit in your bedroom, apparently, is the rule. So, yeah, this is why I do what I do, which is where the rubber hits the road is when people who think they know the mind of God start passing laws to affect you and your family and your children and your daughters. You have to prairie dog up, look around, and start pushing back. So that's why we exist, is to spread the word that this is happening and will continue to happen. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Dr. Ben. It was great. I appreciate your time backing us up, Dr. Ben. We always have a backup host in case something goes wrong. And Jim, it was great to work with you again. I really appreciate all of your insights.
Thank you.
All right.
It was fun. Looking forward to
Thanks, viewers. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.